All right, I am so excited to introduce our next presenter, Gisel. Gisel has been working with the Community Alliance of Family Farmers, or CAF, in Davis. She was born and raised in Fresno and earned a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Sciences and minors in Forestry and Food Systems from UC Berkeley in 2021. This year, Gisel has been working on CAF's ecological farming team to support capacity building for ecological pest management and climate smart farming projects with local farming communities. Gisel has been learning how to utilize agricultural principles to help support farmers and their unique challenges during her GrizzlyCorps service term. And we're excited that she will be continuing to be in the agroecological field in a graduate program at Stanford next year. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Rochelle.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. Let me get my screen shared here. All right, hopefully y'all can see that. So the title of my talk is going to be Dismantling Barriers to Implementation of Ecologically Integrated Farming Practices. Maybe I can see my slide. So I first wanted to provide some personal background and take a moment to position myself in the world and within this work. I'm originally from the suburbs in the heart of the central San Joaquin Valley in Fresno, California, which sits on the ancestral homelands of the Yokuts and the Mono people who have been stewards of this land since time immemorial. They are people to whom I extend my respects and gratitude. And so thinking about the greater Fresno region today, it embodies many realities, that being one. And another being that the region demonstrates an urban to rural interface, sort of creating a gradient between sprawling neighborhoods and tall city buildings to large agricultural lands in the outskirts and beyond those outskirts. So if you've ever taken a drive through the valley, you've probably seen these vast monocultures that look to be perfectly manicured and homogeneous, and they go on for just miles and miles. And this type of agriculture certainly highlights itself as the dominant paradigm in the valley. And it was very much a part of the context and the larger story that even brought my own family to the United States. My mother and my grandparents and my great-grandmother are pictured here. And my mother and my grandparents journeyed to the Central Valley from Jalisco, Mexico when my mother was very young. And she and her siblings worked as seasonal farm workers, picking grapes and garlic and chiles and the like. And my grandfather also had a lunch truck from which he would sell tacos to farm workers in the community. And being undocumented, they faced many harsh realities that often oriented them to food and agriculture in this context of exploitation and struggle. And we know that their story is shared by many, many immigrants in California today. Growing up, though, I did not share those same experiences. I heard about them through my mother and my grandparents, through stories, and this very much affected the ways in which I viewed agriculture as a younger person. I'm willing to wager that many of us at some point also share this singular idea of what agriculture looks like, how it operates and functions, and what it can look like. And many of us were unaware of the possibilities of alternative ways that food systems could look and feel. So when I left for college, when I left Fresno, I didn't have any particular interest in learning more about agriculture. I think I shared a similar mentality to my family, at least when my mother was early in adulthood, who saw farming as a condition that almost needed to be escaped from. And my mother and her siblings all went to college and worked very hard in order to do that. Once I arrived to UC Berkeley for my undergrad, I was an undeclared environmental science major. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to work in natural resources. But it wasn't very long before I stumbled upon the work of Dr. Aide Guzman in the top right. And she graduated with her PhD in Dr. Tim Bowles' lab. They are two of my personal heroes. I owe them a debt of gratitude for guiding me through my academic journey in undergrad and to this day. And it was through this lab that I learned about the term agroecology and how it embodies the study and the practice of agriculture at the intersection of not only science, but social and political understanding. I also learned that there are many small and diversified farms across the state, both within urban neighborhoods and Berkeley and in rural outskirts that are attended by BIPOC farmers and community members. And they exist, they're just often hidden and smaller in number. So that was quite the awakening for me. Some of the folks from this lab were very much stewards of this research farm that's pictured here on campus, but this space very much morphed into a community farm. And it was where I spent a lot of time the summer after graduating, gaining my first farming experience ever. And it very much became a safe space and a gathering space for me and for my community. After graduating, I moved to the East Coast for a couple of years to work in a plant systematics lab. But I found myself really wanting to come back to California. And after applying to GrizzlyCorps, I felt very called to return to the agricultural space. I think I was missing a lot of moments like this one that I'm playing. This was from my very first season of fieldwork doing research back in 2018. And I knew that I wanted to be back out onto the land, and I felt compelled to apply to GrizzlyCorps, especially after reading their framework of promoting regenerative agri-food systems through these tenets of capacity building, community resilience, and climate action, all while providing professional development opportunities. So I was paired with CAF through GrizzlyCorps. CAF stands for Community Alliance with Family Farmers. It's a nonprofit, it's statewide. It works with small scale farmers and ranchers, and we have about 38 staff people right now, but it's very much growing. And per the mission statement, the goal of CAF is to build sustainable food and farming systems through policy advocacy and on-the-ground programs that create more resilient family farms, communities, and ecosystems. And they offer a broad range of programs that I'll list briefly. We have a farm to market program, which helps growers find various business channels and revenue streams. We have a policy and action program, which is a very mighty team, and they have a very consistent presence in Sacramento, advocating for the needs of farmers and often gathering farmers in the community to give testimonies themselves. We have a farmer services team, which envelops services like technical assistance, organic transition support, the wildfire resilience program, and financial assistance for farmers facing climate disasters. And we also have an annual small farm conference that is now hybrid with a virtual conference and regional in-person gatherings across the state. And I'm on the ecological farming team, so I'll explain what that means. The ecological farming team's mission is to work with farmers, policymakers, researchers, and local technical assistance providers to promote, improve, and better understand the implementation of ecological farming throughout California to improve ecosystem health. So we can kind of categorize this work into a few different buckets that I show here. And broadly, what we aim to do is generate resources to support farmers in their ability to use practices that are considered ecological or regenerative. And we do that through on-farm visits, supporting farmers in knowledge sharing, on-farm research trials, and policy advocacy. And we can also categorize that work into sort of two buckets, like climate smart farming, which is basically a focus on soil health, and that includes carbon sequestration, but is definitely not limited to it, and ecological pest management, which essentially gets at the idea of limiting the use of pesticides on farms and leveraging existing ecological relationships to manage pest populations. And I also note that there's an element of Latinx farmer engagement work here that is very much intertwined with these other topics, but I think it's important to acknowledge that working with Latinx communities requires a particular kind of skill set and a cultural competency. And the work is starting from a place with much fewer resources than English programming. So it's noted kind of as its own bucket. And I also noted the underlying question that I think about in my work when I'm in this space, which is how can we center the needs of small scale farmers to help them achieve ecological farming practices. So if you're a GrizzlyCorps fellow, you might recognize this slide and many other elements of this presentation because I've sort of shared this before, but I wanted to share this slide because it's a graphic that I made during our small farm conference, and I think it does a good job of summarizing what practices we would consider ecological. I do think it's missing something about beneficial insects, and so if you notice that, feel free to point that out. But I think this is a pretty good representation of what we would consider ecological or regenerative within the team. And so I kind of represented those by this canopy here, and these sort of agroecological practices are driving what those practices might be in the canopy. And so for this particular activity that I made this graphic for, I wanted to ask farmers to do a little bit of self-reflection about their own practices, and try to get them to identify what values drive their farming practice, whether or not they're conventional, and sort of what barriers or challenges could be inhibiting them from creating a more resilient or more integrated practice on their farm. So I just put this here so people have an idea of how many different kinds of practices there are and how many considerations that there can be and there are for farmers. And I also think it's really important to context to recognize that many or most of small scale farmers in California are working within an economic and societal and historical context to where conventional or industrial farming practices are preferred, either culturally or because as related to profitability. So we try to encourage these practices, and that's definitely the goal. But if a small scale conventional farmer comes to us with a question or curiosity about pesticides or something we wouldn't traditionally consider regenerative, we will definitely not exclude them from support. We want to invite farmers into a conversation, and the overall goal is to help farmers make the best informed decision given all the information we have. So in fact, we're also developing like resources around pesticides so farmers can be well informed. The three capacity building goals we identified for my fellowship were to support grower access to the practices that I mentioned in the tree before. So supporting grower to grower events, farmer technical assistance, which also encompass some resource development and research support. I would say that I played a role working toward all three of these goals pretty consistently throughout the duration of my fellowship, but some months were certainly busier than others, and so I added a little timeline here to highlight those in green. So firstly, to support the coordination of farmer-to-farmer events, the ecological farming team hosts many field days where we invite the regional farming community of different regions across California onto someone's farm. And this farmer is someone who has volunteered to host. They are very excited and enthusiastic about it, mostly. And we bring resources about a given topic of interest and host a gathering on that farm. And something I've learned is that while it's nice to have CAF or our partner organizations present with, resident experts, with our pest management experts, something we've noted is that it's some of the greatest value from these events comes from organizing a space for farmers just to come together, just to know each other, get to know each other, or to pitch ideas for solutions that they might have, and just to know that they're not alone in the challenges that they face. So for these types of events, I've learned that it's just as important to make space for intermingling as it is to have a topic workshop. And we also have listening sessions, which are similar types of in-person gatherings, but they're intended for farmers to talk to each other and very specifically name where CAF can offer resources to support them. So we've done listening sessions with the policy team where growers will literally write their challenges on sticky cards, and then the team will take those and incorporate them into CAF's upcoming policy advocacy plan, for example. Just as an example, one of the 2024 policy goals that Jamie from CAF is strategizing very hard is to work on is toward equitable access to land for California's small scale, beginning and underserved food producers. And so these kinds of goals are very much informed by these roundtable type of discussions. And I put a picture of what that looks like on the left. So one aspect of farmer network building that I admittedly did not necessarily feel equipped for coming into the fellowship, but felt completely welcomed into, and I'm so grateful that I stepped into, was this idea of supporting Latinx farmer engagement. And that reservation mainly came from a place of not growing up speaking Spanish, like primarily or natively. And I admittedly felt very nervous about positioning myself as a resource to farmers to confide in or to offer technical assistance, just because that needs a certain level of fluency. And I wanted farmers to feel very dignified in the spaces that we shared. But when I started the fellowship, it was made very clear to me that there was a gap in resource availability in Spanish and for Latinx communities. And I did feel a sense of responsibility to step into this. So I tried, and I had an amazing support system at CAF, especially Dahlia on the EF team here. They were very accommodating to my skill level, and we were able to make a lot of progress in reaching Latinx farmers. So I added pictures of those different events that I was able to attend here. And to my delight, the farmers completely accepted me and showed appreciation for my presence in these spaces. So I was very, very grateful for the opportunity to be able to attend and help coordinate these events. And I also learned that a lot of the work within Latinx engagement is mainly around community and relationship building. As an example, one of my favorite events that we hosted was just a celebration. It was for Dia de los Muertos, and it's very important to connect with farmers and build relationships with them for them to know that CAP even exists in the first place. And this was one of those events that was more of a cultural celebration than anything else. And I think it was a beautiful way for us to make those connections with farmers. From these conversations that we're able to have in these spaces, we know that many small-scale farmers face financial limitations in their practice. And that is sort of the backdrop against which farmers are making many of their decisions in our current system. So I'll just name that one of our biggest successes being one of our biggest successes in this work of Latinx engagement was being able to connect with farmers and help them apply to the California Department of Food and Agriculture's Healthy Soils program. These types of government grant applications can be very confusing with bureaucracies to navigate and not a lot of translated materials. So Dahlia and I were able to host an in-person office hour, which was more like an in-person 2 full days in Aromas, where we had around 30 farmers come to us in person without even, pre-registering, just kind of showing up at the door. And with the help of a couple partner orgs, we guided them through applying to the Healthy Soils program and are still months later in the process of doing follow-up with the farmers and communications between the farmers and CDFA. So that was a very impactful and meaningful step in this process of technical assistance. And that point kind of blends into my next slide about technical assistance and resource development specifically. I have an example here in the middle of one of the several pages that we created in Spanish about the Healthy Soils program. And we translated the application and shared all of these handouts at our office hours. This one's titled, "Should I Apply to HSP?" And it goes on to list a bunch of relevant details about the program, which I will say was also very helpful for me to make as a TA provider because there are a lot of details. And a couple other visuals I include here are of a couple other deliverables, reports that were drafted before I got to GrizzlyCorps, and I kind of updated to serve our intentions a bit better. So the one on the left is a case study showcasing the results of a research trial that was conducted comparing the different metrics of soil health between a farm that was integrating livestock and one that wasn't. And there are a lot of data and graphs reported from this, but we wanted to make sure that the language to interpret these numbers are accessible. So I added a bit of content around that and some pages of content to provide background information on different metrics of soil health and why they matter to farmers. And then on the right, I have a word cloud that's in the works, but it's going to get included in a report that is analyzing interviews from farmers to understand why or why not they might want to adopt regenerative practices. And these were the words that were most used by farmers in their answers. So a last project I wanted to highlight for Spanish-speaking farmers that I'm just really proud and honored to have contributed to is this video. It's an 18-minute video, so I won't share it. But Dahlia and I visited a farm called Rancho Las Palmas in Davenport, and we essentially wanted to hear their story about their organic practice. And going out to the farm with the videographer, Carlos, was an incredible experience. I'm just really excited to share this video. Sarah, if you're on, I got the final edits today, so I'll send it to you. We've been waiting for it for a while. But I'm really excited to share it to our Spanish language WhatsApp and Facebook and YouTube and our Spanish channels that are more immediately accessible to farmers, much more than something like a blog post, which we do write a lot of as well. But, we're still in the process of building a library and a system for disseminating written resources in Spanish. And that's something that we've been trying to consider and be very conscientious about. So that process will take some time. And in the meantime, it's been really awesome to work on projects like this, which are a little bit more interactive. And the last branch of my fellowship year was to support an on-farm research trial, collecting data and processing samples. And this particular project is intended to generate knowledge around spider mites, which is a very prevalent pest in the state of California. And we are testing the effects of different treatments that might increase the presence of natural predators of spider mites that can curb their populations, maybe instead of rather solely relying on pesticides. And so the farmers who are involved in these trials are very interested and enthusiastic, and they're working with the ecological pest management team to coordinate when they're applying certain treatments on their farm. Franz on the left, he's an awesome farmer that we work with, and he and his partner Emma are especially passionate about integrating ecological practices on their farm. This is a picture of them hosting a field day about their grant-sponsored compost project. And we are currently in the busiest season for the fieldwork. So for that reason, my contribution to CAF will extend until mid-August because as we know, it is very hot and the team is out there every day sampling and they need as much support as they can get. So I'll be out there for a few weeks longer. And from these trials, I'll just note that farmer-facing reports will be generated in the context of helping them make pest management solutions that make the most sense for their farm. So that wraps up my capacity building goals. And I want to thank you for your attention. And I just want to broadly leave with a quote that I think really embodies a major takeaway from the year. It says, "The epiphany is in the beans. I spend a lot of time thinking about our relationships with land, how we are given so much and what we might give back. I try to work through the equations of reciprocity and responsibility, the whys and wherefores of building sustainable relationships with ecosystems, all in my head. But suddenly, there was no intellectualizing, no rationalizing, just the pure sensation of baskets full of mother love, the ultimate reciprocity, loving and being loved in return." Dr. Robin Wall-Kimmerer from Braiding Sweetgrass. And I think this really resonates with me because, I've learned that to be a farmer, you have to love what you do. And regardless of a farmer's educational background in ecology or economics, farmers are deeply knowledgeable about and connected to what's happening on their land or on the land on which they reside. And so it's just been an honor to give farmers the space to explore how they can strengthen their ecological relationships on their farms and in their communities. And moving forward, I hope to continue to be in service to those who make the day-to-day decisions about how our food is grown. So I just want to thank the GrizzlyCorps cohort and the wonderful CAF staff. Y'all are really, truly amazing. And I particularly want to shout out my team. Sarah and Hannah in particular are just amazing mentors, and I really look forward to seeing how we can work together in the future. And I appreciate your mentorship so much. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Gisel.